I've been wanting to do a recording on, I guess you would say, my experience and experiences that I've had while I was, a traveling psychic, and for 15 years I traveled with psychics and mystics, and I went all over the East Coast doing psychic fairs, casinos, teaching at various places at colleges. We even did readings at colleges for students and staff. And we did colleges in South Jersey several times. I also was at the 1980 uh, Parapsychology, United States Parapsychology Conference in Atlantic City. And I worked there as well. And I remember that they had a machine that told you whether you were in an altered state of consciousness. And the machine didn't go off most of the day. And they asked me if I would hold the prongs or the electrodes and do a reading for somebody while I was holding the machine. And the machine went off instantly. I was very easy for me and natural for me to go into an altered state of consciousness. So that proved to me that I do this. Even though I feel it when I do it, I actually feel that my brain waves or whatever actually changing as I read somebody. But initially, when I was a young person, I went to a half price bookstore in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and they had all these books on metaphysics, numerology, palmistry, numbers, all kinds of books. And I started buying them and going back and forth to the store many, many times. And I read all these books, and I was young. And then I joined a palmistry class in Kenilworth, New Jersey, taught by a person called um, Van Worth, and she was an older lady, and her name was Thelma Van Worth. And I joined the palmistry class, and after a few weeks of my participation, she had me teach the class in palmistry. She said I knew more about it than she did. And then she had me teach a numerology class, and I said I don't know anything about numerology. And she gave me several books on numerology, and I digested them, and I taught the class. And she sat back and she said that she had never heard of the things that I came out with from reading those books, that she had read those books and she never was able to extract that type of information from those books that I did. And then I remember I was teaching classes with her in the palmistry and the numerology, and we had meetings every week, and I met all the psychics that she was working with, and she started doing shows at like Ramada Inns and Holiday Inns, and she called me to do shows with her. She said I was one of her prize students, as she put it. So I remember that I took a deck of what they call gypsy witch cards, and they're cards that, have pictures of gypsy witches, and I went over it real quick, and I put the cards down. I remember this lady came to me, and I said, "You're going to meet somebody very soon, and you'll probably marry them." And she said, that her husband had died 7 years before, and she never met anybody else. And am I sure? And I said, "Well, that's what I'm getting." She says, "Well, when will I meet them?" And I said, "In 3 weeks." And then that was the end of that. And then I remember that there was a sign in Menlo Park, New Jersey, that they were going to have a psychic fair. And I figured, well, I'll go there and apply. I'll just do it part time. I didn't want to, do it full time. Because at that time I had a problem. I was involved in a serious car accident where somebody rear-ended my car at 40 miles an hour, and I was like disabled, and this was to get me back out in the world. So I went there, and they told me you have to be interviewed by Shirley, who was one of the owners of the show, and she'll be here in the morning. And I was to interview with her. And I said, "Oh, fine, I'll do it." So when I got there, there were two girls there, and they were to be interviewed before me. They had showed up probably a little early, and yet I was early. So this lady Shirley comes in, a short blonde lady, very attractive, all kinds of jewelry. She owns these shows. They would have like three different psychic fairs going on the same day in different states, like Massachusetts, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York. That was part of the circuit. So this heavy-set lady got up there, and she had all these beads around her neck, and she was what you expect a psychic lady to look like. And Shirley was arguing with her, and she finally went away. And I noticed that she was sweating at the back of her neck. And I know they call that flop sweat. Comedians get that when they're telling jokes and the jokes aren't going over with people. The back of their blouse or shirt or whatever the comedian starts getting wet with perspiration because the jokes aren't going over. Well, she had that. And then the other lady who was like tall and thin, and she had a tote bag, and she took tarot cards out, and she was interviewed by Shirley, and Shirley was shaking her head no, and finally the woman got up and left, and a few cursed her out, and then they said it was my turn. But meanwhile, there was a couple of psychics in the back that were working this show, and they were betting how long it would take before Shirley would bounce the two ladies and bounce me. And as I walked around, they said he'll only last 5 minutes. So I sat down with Shirley, and I did palmistry, and I did cards, and I just was doing it and doing it, didn't think about it. And finally, her husband Vinny was standing over the table, and he said to her, "You've been at this for a half hour. Why is it taking so long?" She said, "Well, he's totally accurate, and he doesn't ask any questions. He just tells you what he sees." And and then what happened was she said, "Could you be here in the morning? I'll have a table set up with your name on it." And I said, "Fine," and I was doing palmistry and cards, with these various people. And then at the end of the week, she came over to me and said, you've been getting a lot of requests." She said, "It's very rare when somebody starts to do mall shows that they get requests." And I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Well, look, we're doing a show in Massachusetts next week, and it's a busy show. How would you like to go there?" I said, "Well, how am I going to get there? I don't know how to get to Massachusetts." She said, "I'll have somebody pick you up, and it won't cost you any money, but you got to take care of your own hotel accommodations or at a motel or whatever. But you'll be real busy. You'll do well." So the person picked me up, and then I wound up traveling for the next 15 years. But that's only part of my story. Of course, there's a lot more stories of when I uh, volunteered with the Water Witch, and I found out he was a famous dowser. And I met Dusty Bunker along the way, who wrote the Divine Triangle, and that's a story in itself. She was only reading psychics that day. She was like an icon of the psychic world because she had written this book, The Divine Triangle, and it was famous among all the psychics. It was like it was like a trustees on psychic work, and she was considered like a regular icon, like a superstar. So they all were getting readings from her. She was telling them about their lives, and I sat down with her, and she dealt out the cards, And then she said, well,